Good morning. Welcome to NTD.
Good morning. Here are today's top stories. Maine Secretary of State says she's duty-bound, making Maine the second state to bar former President Trump from the presidential primary. We have reactions to the unilateral action.
And the attempt to keep Trump off the Colorado ballot likely won't be successful, at least not for the primaries. We ask an analyst for the latest details on the situation.
Israel has confirmed a woman thought to be a hostage in Gaza has been killed. It follows the recent announcement of the death of another hostage, the woman's husband.
Russia unleashes its largest missile attack on Ukraine since the start of the war. What are Ukrainian authorities reporting in the aftermath of the massive assault?
With 2023 almost over, we look back at some of the year's top stories in the final quarter of our yearly review.
If you're among those who feel the year 2023 was a bit rough, see what a little fire, paper, and magic can do to get you on your way to a happy 2024.
This is NTD Good Morning. Live from our global headquarters, here are Evelyn Lee and Kevin Hogan.
Welcome to NTD.
Welcome and happy Friday. Today is December 29th.
Yes, that weekend's right around the corner here. You know, Evelyn, any decision to keep Trump off the ballot is very serious, but this one in Maine is a little different than in Colorado.
You mean because Trump actually won an elector in 2020?
Right, exactly. Yeah, so if this does carry over to the general election, it could have a larger impact because Maine uses that congressional district method to win electors.
Right, and the Maine Secretary of State, Shen Yun has removed former President Trump from the state's 2024 primary ballot. The Democrat issued the decision yesterday, making Maine the second state to disqualify Trump from next year's presidential primary.
Bellows' decision to disqualify the GOP frontrunner is based on an interpretation of the 14th Amendment's vague and rarely used insurrection clause. The state's top election official paused her decision pending a potential appeal in state court.
Trump's campaign says it will quickly file an objection, calling the decision atrocious. NTD's Jeremy Sandberg has some reactions to the unilateral action in Maine.
Maine Secretary of State Shen Yun stated she did not reach the conclusion lightly to bar Trump from the state's primary in her 34-page ruling Thursday.
The U.S. Constitution does not tolerate an assault on our government, on the foundations of our government, and that Maine election law and the Constitution required, indeed obligated me to act.
Bellows presided over an administrative hearing earlier this month about Trump's eligibility for office. A group of former state lawmakers filed the challenge against Trump. Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson weighed in on X, calling Bellows' decision reckless and partisan. He says he's confident the Supreme Court will reverse it. GOP presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy had one request for Americans after Bellows' announcement, posting on X, "Open your eyes."
It's unconstitutional, it's anti-American, it's wrong.
Ramaswamy told Fox News he'll withdraw from any GOP primary ballot where competitors are forcibly removed through unconstitutional maneuvers. He's calling for other GOP candidates to follow suit.
We then take Maine out of the GOP primary process. That's the logical way to handle this.
Florida governor and presidential candidate Ron DeSantis told Fox Maine's ruling is, in his words, opening Pandora's box. DeSantis says it defies every notion of constitutional due process, abided by for over 200 years. Maine's procedure for deciding ballot eligibility is different than Michigan's and Colorado's. Eligibility is first considered by the Secretary of State before any court. Bellows cited the Colorado ruling in her decision and its appeal. She wrote a possible reversal by the U.S. Supreme Court did not relieve her of her responsibility to act. She acknowledged that the nation's highest court is likely to eventually weigh in and told CNN she'll follow its ruling. Trump's attorneys Wednesday asked Bellows to recuse herself from the issue for public statements after January 6 that, quote, exhibit personal bias in this matter. The letter cited several past posts on Twitter, now X. They say that show she already made the conclusion on alleged insurrection then, before the submission of any evidence or argument in the current matter. Trump's team has vowed to appeal Bellows' decision to Maine's Superior Court. Maine's GOP primary is March 5th. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
Colorado Secretary of State says Trump will stay on the state's primary ballot unless the U.S. Supreme Court either declines the case or affirms the Colorado ruling. Here for some insight into the challenges Trump is facing in Colorado and Maine, we speak to Jeff Cruier, a political analyst and TV radio host. Jeff, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so Trump's campaign describes Maine Secretary of State Bellows, who is a Democrat, as a hyper-partisan leftist who is interfering in the presidential election. In your view, what is driving her decision to remove Trump from the ballot? A carefully weighed decision or a political attack?
No, I think the decision was made right after January 6th, as they pointed out. I mean, she's been partisan and she had her mind made up 3 years ago. Kevin, this is absolutely atrocious. We've got Colorado and Maine taking the decision away from the people of those states and trying to bar unilaterally a presidential candidate, a former president who has not been charged with insurrection. He's not been convicted of insurrection. The Section 3 of the 14th Amendment applies to Confederates and those engaged in rebellion. President Trump, at the speech on January 6th, called for people to peacefully and patriotically make their voices heard. He went on Twitter later and told people to leave in peace. The man is being railroaded, Kevin, and the reason, I believe, is they are deathly afraid of him being back in the White House as president. They hate him, and they hate even more his Make America Great Again agenda.
So Maine's Republican Party has cast Bellows as the most progressive Senate candidate in America. What's the likelihood that her political ideology is a factor in this decision?
100%, and I think it's the same thing in Colorado with the 4 leftist Supreme Court justices there. Even 3 of the Democrats there did not go along with it, so it was a split 4-3 decision. But it's a blue state Colorado, a blue state Maine. But as you pointed out, Donald Trump won an elector there in 2016 and 2020 in the rural congressional district as they split. So that's taking away an electoral vote from him. But again, it's taking away the choice of the people. And I commend Vivek Ramaswamy for dropping out of any ballots where this kind of decision is made. And I call on the other presidential candidates to follow his lead and to do that as well. This can't stand. I mean, Kevin, this is atrocious. And once again, our voice is being targeted here. It's our decision who should be elected president, not a Democrat court, not a Democrat Secretary of State.
So, Jeff, we can imagine what Trump supporters are going to think about this decision here in Maine, but the moves by Maine Secretary of State and Colorado Supreme Court, even though he's staying on the ballot in Colorado for the time being, to remove him from that ballot, to affect voters who are not strongly for or strongly against Trump, but are in the middle?
Well, I mean, I think those voters should come to a quick conclusion that Democrats fear Donald Trump. And, you know, the narrative has been, oh, we want Trump to be the nominee. We would love to face Trump. Well, everything they have done since the day he condemned the escalator 8 years ago is that they're afraid of his agenda and afraid of him as a candidate. So this just is another piece of evidence. I mean, there's so much evidence that they're targeting him and preventing him from being available for voters. And this is, again, an outrageous step that they've taken. I think it should convince people in the middle that he's someone that we really need, because it's all partisan Democrats that are doing this. So I'm calling on the Supreme Court, Kevin, this has got to be handled by the Supreme Court as soon as possible to nip this in the bud. Otherwise, we're going to see Democrat states all over the country follow their lead.
Right, and it has definitely been said that the Supreme Court will rule on this, making the law of the land for the nation. Jeff Crouere, a political analyst and TV radio host, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Department of Justice is threatening to sue Texas Governor Greg Abbott again, this time over a new Texas law that grants local law enforcement the authority to arrest illegal immigrants. The DOJ says the law violates the U.S. Constitution. It's warning Abbott to back down from enforcing it. The measure, known as Senate Bill 4, is set to take effect in March. Abbott reacted by accusing the Biden administration of, quote, destroying America. Abbott on X said not only does the administration fail to enforce current U.S. immigration laws, it now wants to stop Texas from enforcing laws against illegal immigration.
And from politics to the nature, a powerful offshore storm is driving towering waves into the California coastline. The wild weather is triggering flooding and warnings of dangerous swells. CCTV captured the moment a rogue wave hit the beach in the city of Ventura, wiping out several bystanders and vehicles. At least 8 people were transported to local hospitals due to this incident. A non-paying customer crashed the gates of his California restaurant. Massive waves drew surfers and spectators to the famed Mavericks Beach surf spot on Thursday. 30 to 40-foot waves breaking at the legendary site were reported. High water and dangerous rip currents will churn along some of California's beaches through the weekend. Much of the West Coast is under coastal flood and high surf alerts.
Coming up, Israel has confirmed a woman who was thought to be a hostage in Gaza has been killed. Find out the details.
And the Israeli military unveiling details about a tragic friendly fire incident that killed 3 Israeli hostages. That's as the IDF issues a stern warning to Hezbollah terrorists in Lebanon. Jason Perry reports after this break.
Good to have you back. Now we have some news out of Israel, where an American-Canadian-Israeli woman thought to be held hostage in Gaza was pronounced dead yesterday.
Judith Weinstein and her husband, Gad Haggai, were taken to an early morning walk on October 7th near Kibbutz Nir Oz, and that's when Hamas terrorists burst across the border into Israel.
The two were thought to be among the hostages still held in captivity in Gaza, but the kibbutz announced last week that Haggai was killed on October 7th and his body was taken to Gaza.
News emerged yesterday that Weinstein was also killed on October 7th and her body is also being held in Gaza. It was not immediately clear how Israeli authorities determined their deaths. According to the kibbutz, the couple are survived by 2 sons, 2 daughters, and 7 grandchildren.
What exactly happened when the Israel Defense Forces accidentally killed 3 Israeli hostages?
Israel now shares their findings. It also comes as the IDF issues a strong warning to Hezbollah, a terrorist group in Lebanon. NTD's Jason Perry has the latest on the war.
Hundreds of Israeli youth gathered in Jerusalem on Thursday, urging for the release of the hostages held by Hamas terrorists in the Gaza Strip.
We're here because we have people our age in Gaza. We want them to come back to their homes, and that's why we come here. We want them to come back.
And time is ticking for the more than 100 hostages still being held captive in the Gaza Strip. Last week, we reported that a 73-year-old American-Israeli hostage had been killed and his wife was still in captivity. Now, her community in Israel says that she was actually killed on October 7th when Hamas terrorists murdered over 1,200 innocent people in Israel. Meanwhile, this former hostage, Chin Alma Goldstein, who did make it out alive, shared her experience on that tragic day. She said Hamas terrorists burst into her family's home and killed her husband and her oldest daughter on October 7th. Then Hamas took her and her other 3 children as hostages. They were held captive for 51 days before they were released. She explained what it was like.
Some hostages were beaten, handcuffed for some hours. Not just men, women were beaten too. And we heard of sexual abuse. Some firsthand, and some were girls we met who witnessed it or had heard about it.
She and her other 3 children returned to Israel in this military helicopter. Meanwhile, other families were crushed earlier this month after Israeli forces mistakenly shot and killed 3 Israeli hostages in the Gaza Strip. On Thursday, the IDF released the findings of their investigation. The IDF spokesperson explained that one soldier initially fired at the 3 Israeli hostages, killing 2 of them, and the other ran away. Then, 2 other IDF soldiers who did not hear the order to hold their fire shot and killed the 3rd hostage.
After entire days of encountering explosives, watching your friends die, having RPGs fired at you, encountering terrorists wearing civilian clothes without a weapon, pulling you towards all kinds of explosives in the streets, in that situation, a soldier stood at a window with limited visibility. He made a mistake. He fired mistakenly.
Meanwhile, Israeli President Benjamin Netanyahu said they are having discussions about getting the hostages released, but he did not give any details. as the IDF continues to push forward in the Gaza Strip to defeat Hamas and bring the hostages home, things are heating up across Israel's northern border. Recently, the IDF appears to be hardening their stance against Hezbollah terrorists in Lebanon, saying that if the terrorist group does not stop firing on Israeli communities, Hezbollah could cause a full-scale war with Lebanon and that Israel could turn Beirut into another Gaza Strip. However, Hezbollah on Thursday appeared unfazed by Israel's recent remarks, saying they are not intimidated by threats or warnings, and they are ready to escalate if necessary. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Shelling along the Lebanon-Israel border continued throughout the day yesterday. This as Lebanese officials spent the day in meetings with French and British counterparts about the growing conflict between Hezbollah and Israel.
The Iran-backed terrorist group claimed it carried out simultaneous attacks yesterday, targeting multiple locations across northern Israel.
Here's an IDF spokesman on Israel's plans to take further action against the terrorist group.
They literally could create an entire terror umbrella over the state of Israel. They've been backed and trained by Iran for decades, and they are a serious terror army. When push comes to shove, if the diplomatic community cannot take care of this, we will use whatever weapons and means at our disposal to take them out.
Following up on our coverage of the claims about Hamas controlling UN relief operations in the Gaza Strip, we've just heard back from UNRWA.
Julia Tuma, the director of communications for UNRWA, says the agency has strict clearance processes for all of its staff in Gaza, adding that UNRWA shares a list of its staff with the government of Israel every year. She also says UNRWA has never received any response or objection from Israel about the content of the list.
And changing topics, Russia unleashed over 100 missiles and dozens of drones against Ukrainian targets, officials said today. The attacks killed at least 18 civilians. A Ukrainian Air Force official called it the biggest aerial barrage of the nearly two-year war.
The Ukrainian Air Force intercepted almost 90 missiles and nearly 30 drones overnight, according to Ukraine's military chief.
During the nearly 18-hour attack, dozens were injured and more were buried under rubble. Exact numbers are still unknown. Ukrainian officials say a maternity hospital, apartment buildings, and schools were among the buildings damaged.
Authorities said the attack hit 6 cities, including the capital Kyiv and other areas across Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Russia used every type of weapon in its arsenal.
Fighting along the front line is largely bogged down by winter weather. Ukraine's summer counteroffensive didn't make much headway along the roughly 600-mile battle line. Coming up, we take a look at the price of gas and what you could be paying at the pump next year.
And Google has agreed to settle a consumer privacy lawsuit after being accused of tracking millions of users. We get the details from the host of NTD Business in a moment.
Welcome back, and here with us now, as you can see, is NTD Business host Don Ma. Welcome, Don, to talk about the trends in gas prices.
Gas prices will notably fall in 2024, according to gas information website GasBuddy.com. So, Don, what are the forecasts looking like for next year?
Well, GasBuddy actually made a forecast for 2023 as well, and it was actually pretty accurate, so I think it's worth a look at their forecasts for next year. So they're saying somewhere around $3.38 for a gallon of gasoline on average in 2024, and this would represent a significant drop from the average of this year, which was $3.51 a gallon. So, you know, if you do a little bit of calculation, what this would amount to for Americans in terms of savings would be over $30 billion potentially saved on gasoline next year if the predictions are true. So, I mean, if it is true, this would be welcome news for consumers because, you know, not only does gasoline represent a lot of the spending on a day-to-day basis, but everything we see in a store at some point was transported there using a type of vehicle that runs on gasoline. So, you know, this could actually lower inflation a little bit as well, potentially. So GasBuddy predicts that the national average is going to top out at $3.63 somewhere in May. And by December 2024, we could actually see $2.99 for a gallon of gas. So the reason why GasBuddy is pretty optimistic here is because the U.S. actually produced a record amount of oil per day in the fourth quarter of this year, around 13 million barrels per day in the fourth quarter. So, I mean, on top of everything that GasBuddy has predicted, this number could actually provide another layer of protection, another layer of cushion for consumers against spiking gas prices.
Sounds good. Yeah, and you just mentioned it. Some people even said it was eerily accurate. So how confident are you that this is going to continue like that? How are the predictions going to be for next year?
Yeah, great question. But like any forecast, it could be wrong. So the price could be a little bit higher, could be a little bit lower. So if we do see an economic downturn in 2024, that could lower gas prices than what GasBuddy has predicted. On the other hand, if we do see an escalation in the conflict in the Middle East, that could threaten energy supplies, and in turn that would spike up oil prices, back up to potentially even $100 a barrel, and of course that would give upwards pressure to gasoline prices. So another concern here would be, according to GasBuddy, is that America's limited refinery capacity, because refineries do actually play a critical role in transforming crude oil into gasoline and other products as well. So we've seen this year with extreme weather events, including heat waves, at times have knocked down these refineries, putting them offline and also putting a bottleneck on the supply of gasoline, especially on the West Coast. I mean, it only takes really one refinery to go down to put a surge in gas prices. And of course, we can't forget about hurricanes, right? That could also disrupt refineries. And OPEC Plus as well is another factor. They haven't shied away from cutting supply, and the White House's relationship with OPEC countries have been iffy, to say the least. So a lot of wild cards that could put a disruption on the predictions by GasBuddy.
Well, it is good news that gas prices are coming down. We got to get from point A to point B. And GasBuddy says that diesel prices will fall too. So hopefully that can give a little relief on food prices. Now, what's the update with the Google consumer privacy lawsuit?
Yeah, great question there. Google agreed to settle the consumer privacy lawsuit for at least $5 billion. California judge put the scheduled February trial on hold yesterday after lawyers for Google and consumers said they reached a preliminary settlement. The lawsuit claimed Google's secretly tracked the use of internet of millions who thought they were browsing privately. Plaintiffs allege that Google's analytics, cookies, and apps let the company track their activity even when they set Google's Chrome browser to incognito mode and other browsers to private browsing mode. Google's bid to dismiss the case was denied earlier this year.
Well, thank you so much for those updates. And I want to wish you a Happy New Year now, because we're going to have you back only in the new year, right? So
yeah, you as well.
See you next year, Don.
See you next year, 2024.
Thank you. And from the start of the Israel-Hamas war to the Colorado Supreme Court decision to bar Trump, we look back at 2023's last quarter in the final part of our yearly review.
Want to wash away the tough times of 2023? Writing a letter and burning it is the way to do it at this New York City event. Good to have you back. With 2023 almost over, we take a look at some of the major events that happened near the end of the year.
From the start of the Israel-Hamas war to the Colorado ruling blocking former President Trump from the presidential primary, NTD's Jeremy Sandberg has the last segment of our multi-part series.
Hamas launches a terrorist attack on Israel October 7th, firing thousands of rockets from Gaza and breaching the border to murder civilians in towns. The terrorists killed around 260 people at an Israeli music festival that morning and kidnapped others back to Gaza to parade through the streets. Israel says Hamas terrorists killed roughly 1,200 people and took over 240 hostages. The Israeli government officially declared war on Hamas October 8th and began targeting terrorist commanders and infrastructure with airstrikes in response. Evacuations were issued along Israel's northern border with Lebanon as clashes with Iran-backed terrorist group Hezbollah increased. An explosion at a hospital in Gaza City triggers outrage mid-October after widespread reports of an Israeli airstrike. The U.S. and Israel, after an investigation, determined it was caused by a misfired rocket by the terrorist group Palestinian Islamic Jihad.
I was deeply saddened and outraged by the explosion at the hospital in Gaza yesterday. And based on what I've seen, it appears as though it was done by the other team, not you.
Hamas releases the first hostages October 20th, 2 American citizens. Aid trucks begin entering Gaza through the Rafah border crossing from Egypt. And the United Nations Secretary General begins accusing Israel of violating international humanitarian law in the Gaza Strip. At the end of October, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announces ground operations in Gaza have begun, vowing to destroy the enemy above and below ground. Now, former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is ousted. Representative Mike Johnson wins the gavel as the 4th GOP nominee. Netanyahu, November 7th, states Israel's military had encircled Gaza City and is operating inside.
MRI center.
The military begins operating near Gaza's largest hospital, Al-Shifa, and finds weapons and terrorist infrastructure during a raid.
A closet here, which is in the main part of the clinic. This is what they found. A live grenade, ammunition, fighting vest.
November 24th, Qatar's foreign ministry announces Israel and Hamas have agreed to a 4-day pause, subject to extension, to facilitate the release of hostages. The pause lasts 7 days. Hamas releases around 100 hostages in exchange for roughly 210 Palestinian prisoners held on terrorism-related charges. The pause ends when Hamas violates terms of the deal by firing rockets at Israel and failing to release at least 10 hostages a day. At the APEC summit in San Francisco, President Biden doubles down on his view that Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping is effectively a dictator. And in Argentina, Libertarian Javier Milei is elected president, and 40 construction workers are rescued from a collapsed tunnel in India's Himalayas after being trapped for 17 days. Israel resumes combat operations against Hamas targets in Gaza December 1st. The U.S. vetoes a proposed United Nations Security Council demand for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire, saying it would only benefit Hamas. Israeli troops accidentally shoot and kill 3 hostages, a tragedy that the IDF says violates its own rules of engagement, as they were holding a white flag. The incident is under investigation. The IDF also uncovers a massive Hamas tunnel big enough to drive cars through, a quarter mile from the Erez crossing at the Israeli border. Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry claims over 20,000 civilians have been killed. The numbers are unverified and do not differentiate combatants. Back in the U.S., the Colorado Supreme Court rules former President Trump ineligible to appear on the state's primary ballot. 4 of 7 justices deemed that Trump had participated in an insurrection and should be disqualified under a rarely used clause of the 14th Amendment in the U.S. Constitution. The Colorado court placed the ruling on hold until January 4th, pending Trump's appeal. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
Well, luckily they were able to get at least a ceasefire at some point to get some of those hostages out. And even one said that she went through a Holocaust in that time.
Right. Yeah, I can't imagine the shock, what it feels like to wake up to those newspaper headlines that Israel's at war, almost like a flashback to 1973. And it seems like, the Israeli military says that there are still months to come. So, of course, there will be a lot more that will carry on into the new year. But moving on, there is also a lot that is out of sight, out of mind. People from all over the world lined up in New York City's Times Square yesterday to burn away their bad memories of 2023.
NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on the annual tradition called Good Riddance Day.
Oh my gosh!
This is the 17th annual Good Riddance Day, and this year's participants were encouraged to write down the year's unpleasant memories on a flash paper. An on-site magician would then burn them into thin air. TJ Witham of the Times Square Alliance says the event is a chance to reflect on times past.
Maybe think of some of the negative things that happened, some of the things you'd like to get rid of, some of the things you'd like to cleanse yourself of.
He says the tradition helps people welcome 2024 with hope. Tamara came to burn away the struggles of her sister.
Because my sister, during her 7th month of pregnancy, was diagnosed with cancer. So it was a really bad year, but she's doing a lot better, but we're ready to say goodbye to that.
Tamara says her sister's doing much better, but they're ready to send her troubles packing for good. Kiara and Samantha both want to do away with people-pleasing, anxiety, and self-doubt.
I think just starting afresh and turning a new page for the both of us in 2024 is exactly why we're here today.
New Yorker Barbara Litt wants the horrors of warfare to hit the road.
I wish to an end to the war, all wars, both, it's just horrible what's going on.
Those who want to try a similar ritual to start 2024 out right still have a couple of days before the new year is rung in. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
NTD News, the fastest growing independent news source in America, bringing you breaking news from around the world. Expert analysis, investigative reporting, and original award-winning documentaries. We're known for our uncensored China coverage you won't find anywhere else. We cover the stories that affect you and shape our world without the political noise. We report from the heart with you in mind. Watch us right here on NTD News.
Good morning. Welcome to NTD.
Good morning. Here are today's top stories. Maine Secretary of State says she's duty-bound, making Maine the second state to bar former President Trump from the presidential primary. We have reactions to the unilateral action.
The Department of Justice threatens to sue Texas over its new law targeting illegal border crossers. The DOJ says the law violates the Constitution.
Israel has confirmed a woman thought to be a hostage in Gaza has been killed. It follows the recent announcement of the death of another hostage, the woman's husband.
SpaceX successfully launched a secret military vessel into space yesterday. What do we know about its payload so far?
You have a long list of New Year's resolutions planned, but now for the hard part, making them stick. Might a stick of gum help? Find out this food scientist's unique strategy.
In London, Big Ben celebrates his 100th birthday alongside New Year's celebrations. We look at a timeline of the iconic bell and its clock tower.
This is NTD Good Morning. Live from our global headquarters, here are Evelyn Lee and Kevin Hogan.
Welcome to NTD.
Welcome and happy Friday. Today is December 29th. In today's top news, Maine Secretary of State Shen Yun has removed former President Trump from the state's 2024 primary ballot.
The Democrat issued the decision yesterday, making Maine the second state to disqualify Trump from next year's presidential primary. Bellow's decision to disqualify the GOP frontrunner is based on an interpretation of the 14th Amendment's vague and rarely used insurrection clause. The state's top election official paused her decision pending a potential appeal in state court.
Trump's campaign says it will quickly file an objection, calling the decision atrocious. NTD's Jeremy Sandberg has some reactions to the unilateral action in Maine.
Secretary of State Shen Yun stated she did not reach the conclusion lightly to bar Trump from the state's primary in her 34-page ruling Thursday.
The U.S. Constitution does not tolerate an assault on our government, on the foundations of our government, and that Maine election law and the Constitution required, indeed obligated me to act.
Bellows presided over an administrative hearing earlier this month about Trump's eligibility for office. A group of former state lawmakers filed the challenge against Trump. Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson weighed in on X, calling Bellows' decision reckless and partisan. He says he's confident the Supreme Court will reverse it. GOP presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy had one request for Americans after Bellows' announcement, posting on X, "Open your eyes."
It's unconstitutional, it's anti-American, it's wrong.
Ramaswamy told Fox News he'll withdraw from any GOP primary ballot where competitors are forcibly removed through unconstitutional maneuvers. He's calling for other GOP candidates to follow suit.
We then take Maine out of the GOP primary process. That's the logical way to handle this.
Florida Governor and presidential candidate Ron DeSantis told Fox Maine's ruling is, in his words, opening Pandora's box. DeSantis says it defies every notion of constitutional due process, abided by for over 200 years. Maine's procedure for deciding ballot eligibility is different than Michigan's and Colorado's. Eligibility is first considered by the Secretary of State before any court. Bellows cited the Colorado ruling in her decision and its appeal. She wrote a possible reversal by the U.S. Supreme Court did not relieve her of her responsibility to act. She acknowledged that the nation's highest court is likely to eventually weigh in and told CNN she'll follow its ruling. Trump's attorneys Wednesday asked Bellows to recuse herself from the issue for public statements after January 6 that, quote, exhibit personal bias in this matter. The letter cited several past posts on Twitter, now X. They say that show she already made the conclusion on alleged insurrection then, before the submission of any evidence or argument in the current matter. Trump's team has vowed to appeal Bellows' decision to Maine's Superior Court. Maine's GOP primary is March 5th. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
Democratic Congressman Jared Golden put out a statement after the ruling. The representative for Maine's 2nd District says Trump should be allowed on the ballot until actually being found guilty of the crime of insurrection.
Golden noted that he had voted to impeach Trump over January 6th, but added the U.S. is a nation of laws. And now for some political analysis surrounding Maine's decision to remove Trump's name from the ballot, we're bringing in Raven Harrison, a political strategist and former congressional candidate. Raven, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Good morning.
So we've heard what Representative Golden of Maine has said about not it being a good idea to take Trump's name off the ballot, even though he voted to impeach him. Is this evidence that the Secretary of State is overstepping her bounds here?
It absolutely is. She spoke a lot and in great detail about her moral obligations. She didn't speak about what the Constitution actually says. So you cannot remove this man under the 14th Amendment, citing insurrection. He has not been convicted of any such crime. It is also a good time to do a quick history lesson that when the 14th Amendment was introduced, only 94% of Republicans voted for it, but 0 Democrats. So the fact that they are obsessed with the 14th Amendment now is very telling.
Right, and I'll just point out here that Bellows had made her decision after a bipartisan group of former lawmakers had challenged Trump's position on the ballot here. Now, we can imagine what Trump supporters are going to think about this decision here in Maine, but what do you have to say to people who are voters that don't support Trump?
I would say the voters are, this is about your freedom to decide who you want to be governed by. And no politician and no partisan witch hunt is going to take that from you. Both my parents are Air Force veterans, so is my husband. They fought for the freedom of you to choose. And these political persecutions are not choice. They are tantamount to tyranny. We have got to follow the Constitution as it was written. He has not had due process. He has not been convicted of a crime. So trying to remove him from the ballot under this guise is premature and unconstitutional.
So a little history here on Bellows. She is a former executive director of the American Civil Liberties Union, and Trump's lawyers had asked that she recuse herself from this whole decision-making process. Do you think that this is something that is going to be more consequential, given that Maine actually used that split in how it divvies up the electoral votes, whereas in Colorado it's winner take all?
Well, I do think that there's some element to that there's a difference in how they do it in terms of them diddling out the electoral votes. But again, at the end of the day, Maine has 4 electoral votes to give for president. And there's been now posturing and rumors and Republicans talking about removing Biden from the ballot in Texas, Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Florida if they continue on this course. So they can win without Maine. They can't win without Texas, Florida, Arizona, and Pennsylvania. So I think this is a road we should not start down. We should not be turning our political systems into this kind of rhetoric.
Right, I see what you mean, that the tit for tat is not the correct direction to take here. Raven Harrison, political strategist and former congressional candidate, thank you for weighing in on this.
Thank you so much.
The Department of Justice is threatening to sue Texas Governor Greg Abbott again, this time over a new Texas law that grants local law enforcement the authority to arrest illegal immigrants. The DOJ says the law violates the U.S. Constitution. It's warning Abbott to back down from enforcing it. The measure, known as Senate Bill 4, is set to take effect in March. Abbott reacted by accusing the Biden administration of, quote, destroying America. Abbott on X said not only does the administration fail to enforce current U.S. immigration laws, it now wants to stop Texas from enforcing laws against illegal immigration. And now we have some news out of Israel, where an American-Canadian-Israeli woman thought to be held hostage in Gaza was pronounced dead yesterday.
Judith Weinstein and her husband, Gad Haggai, were taking an early morning walk on October 7th near Kibbutz Nir Oz. That's when Hamas terrorists burst across the border into Israel.
The two were thought to be among the hostages still held in captivity in Gaza, but the kibbutz announced last week that Haggai was killed on October 7th and his body was taken to Gaza.
News emerged yesterday that Weinstein was also killed on October 7th and her body is also being held in Gaza. It was not immediately clear how Israeli authorities determined their deaths. According to the kibbutz, the couple are survived by 2 sons, 2 daughters, and 7 grandchildren.
Shelling along the Lebanon-Israel border continued throughout the day yesterday. This as Lebanese officials spent the day in meetings with French and British counterparts about the growing conflict between Hezbollah and Israel.
The Iran-backed terrorist group claimed it carried out simultaneous attacks yesterday, targeting multiple locations across northern Israel.
Here's an IDF spokesman on Israel's plans to take further action against the terrorist group.
They literally could create an entire terror umbrella over the state of Israel. They've been backed and trained by Iran for decades, and they are a serious terror army. When push comes to shove, if the diplomatic community cannot take care of this, we will use whatever weapons and means at our disposal to take them out.
Up next, the U.S. military and SpaceX teamed up for a successful launch yesterday.
But what could the secret military payload be? We have more on the mystery coming up. And eat less, exercise more, nix the soda, and switch to unsweetened tea. Great ideas for New Year's resolutions on slimming down. But how do you beef up your commitment? Catch a food scientist's idea.
And Big Ben turns 100. We take a look at the iconic Bell's timeline over the years. That story after this short break. Welcome back. SpaceX's Falcon Heavy rocket returned to the skies yesterday evening. It launched a mysterious spacecraft for the U.S. military that will carry out cutting-edge research.
The rocket lifted off from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida, carrying the military's X-37B spaceplane, which is unmanned and operates autonomously.
The rocket's boosters returned to Earth and touched down safely. It's unclear exactly where the space plane is going. The launch came after more than 2 weeks of delays. During that time, China sent its own secretive spacecraft into orbit.
Some in the industry speculate the military payload mirrors the X-37B in form and function. Over the years, the Pentagon has been tight-lipped regarding information about the robotic test vehicle. Details have remained largely classified.
And New Year's Eve is rapidly approaching. Many use the New Year's holiday to make resolutions or ponder lessons they've garnered throughout the year.
We asked people across America about their resolutions and what the year taught them. Let's take a look.
As another year comes to an end, people turn their thoughts to the upcoming year. Making a New Year's resolution is a time-honored tradition for many.
I think that we're just trying to be smarter with our money this year so that we can buy a house at the end of the year. Yeah.
Honestly, to kind of just exercise more, to focus more on mental health and like overall health, and just to have a great year and accomplish many things.
To go explore and I guess really venture outside my comfort zone. That's what I'm trying to do this coming year.
And wish the world peace. We got a lot going on in the world. It is so much segregation, so much division.
Lose weight and get back in shape from all the candy.
2023 was a memorable year. What were some lessons people took away from the year's events?
You know, family's the most important thing, and no matter how hard things get, just keep on fighting through it.
Life is hard. Life is really hard. There's ups and downs, but to never give up.
I have to put in the effort for myself to do anything, and everything's on me.
Just everybody be happy, spend time with your family, enjoy that quality time because it may not be guaranteed.
Just love on your family. That's the most important thing.
The New Year's holiday is more than just a transition from one year to the next. It offers an opportunity to reflect on the past, look for ways to improve, and to plan for the future.
Yeah, I think I'd say mine would be just to eat healthier next year. Next year, it's crazy because when I say that, it's basically the next show that we have will be next year.
Yeah, well, and you know what they say about these New Year's resolutions, you should always make a specific goal.
So not like things like being more healthy in the new year?
Yeah, like
yeah,
trying to work out.
I should rethink that.
Like for me, like trying to work out at least 3 times a week.
Oh, nice. Yeah, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
Then you can actually keep track of what it, that's a good
measurable.
idea.
And you know, I spoke to a doctor, Taylor Wallace. He's a food scientist at George Washington University, to find out how to make and keep New Year's resolutions for your health. Let's check it out.
Well, for me, it's all about small changes, right? When we try to completely overhaul someone's diet, they usually fail within at least a couple of weeks, especially when it comes to this time of year with New Year's resolutions. So for me, it's small changes. Things like we're currently conducting a study on chewing gum, where we find that gum chewers tend to consume less soda, less sugary foods, so you can offset some of those unhealthy habits with something that is healthy for dental hygiene. Another example is switch out those sugary beverages with unsweet tea. That's something that people universally like. It's a small change that you can implement, and we know that the antioxidants in unsweet tea are very heart healthy. For those of us who are concerned about hypertension or our blood cholesterol levels.
And Dr. Wallace, I hear that chewing gum will actually stimulate the digestive process, make you hungrier, maybe it helps you lose weight?
Well, so there's not a lot of research in this area to be confirmatory. However, like I said, we do know that people who chew gum tend to have what we call a better diet quality. So they tend to consume more healthier foods, and they tend to refrain from more unhealthy snacks, particularly sugar-sweetened beverages like soda. When it comes to stimulating your taste buds that extend all the way down into your stomach, that's a really new emerging area of research that's exciting, but I'm not sure we're ready to make recommendations on that just yet.
Really interesting, yeah, and chewing gum would be a simple way to start making some of these small changes, cutting out more of those sugary drinks and pops. That's a good idea too. How do people stick to their resolutions? Do you have any tips?
Well, for me, it's always make resolutions that are sustainable, right? People don't like when you tell them what not to eat, but they do fairly well when you tell them what to eat. So have 1 or 2 cups of unsweet tea. Chew a stick of unsweet gum twice a day. People resonate with that, and it's practical and it's implementable in their everyday lifestyles.
That is great. And if people have a hard time keeping their resolutions, they're not alone, because studies show that about 80% of those are broken within the first year, and 20% are broken within the first week of January. So it can be tough. But tell us a little bit how you stay on track.
Well, again, it's about keeping yourself accountable, 1. It's about making small changes that are implementable and that are practical for your lifestyle. And 2, one of the things that studies do show is that healthy people tend to coalesce with other healthy people, right? So if your friends are going out to dinner and they're sharing an entree, you're likely to do the same thing. If your friends are going to the gym, you're likely to exhibit those same healthy habits. So surrounding yourself with people that are health conscious is a good step in the right direction.
That's a good point, and a study by YouGov shows that about half the people actually make New Year's resolutions to lose some weight. So, Dr. Taylor Wallace, food scientist at George Washington University, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's amazing that a little simple thing like chewing gum can actually help you achieve those goals.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, also it's crazy, those stats that you've mentioned, 20% of those New Year's resolutions are broken within the first week. Wow. Yeah, it makes me rethink that. Yeah, I think he gave me some good inspiration. Unfortunately, I was not able to catch everything that he said here in the studio, but it seems like just those non-sugary, not sweetened tea or chewing some gum can help me go a long way.
Yeah, and those stats, maybe it's evidence that people should make attainable goals
You know, I've heard actually also somebody, I think it was from last year, somebody saying that maybe you can also tell your friends about it, tell your family about it, and then it feels like that you're more committed to that goal, and maybe they even help you to be held accountable.
Yeah, the buddy system.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, you know, I am guilty of eating those refined sugars and make my own ice cream. So you pour that in there. Maybe I could use maple syrup instead.
Oh, yeah, that's right. But I'm sure you can allow yourself that. I know that you're a very healthy eater. All right, we're heading to London, where the new year also coincides with another special anniversary.
The famous Big Ben is ringing out chimes for the new year as it celebrates its 100th anniversary.
The clock tower on the Houses of Parliament in London has been at the center of events marking the start and end of wars and other momentous occasions, of course. Here's NTD's Costa Menes to give us a timeline of the events.
As the UK welcomes the arrival of 2024, Big Ben and 4 other bells in Elizabeth Tower will ring out the start of the new year. Contrary to common belief, it is not the tower going by the name of Big Ben, but rather its largest bell in Elizabeth Tower. It was part of the rebuilding of the Palace of Westminster, which was badly damaged in a fire in 1834, until its completion in 1859.
It was a huge undertaking. The entire palace had to be based on a vast lump of concrete, which we call the Barry Raft, which is still there, 2 meters thick at least, more like 5 under the 2 towers, to stabilize it on the small gravel island, which is what Westminster really is, beside a strong and at the time largely untamed river.
In 1941, the tower was damaged during a Nazi bombing raid. But patriotic newsreels proclaimed at the time, the Houses of Parliament were one of the casualties of London's 10th of May Blitz, but Big Ben refused to stop work for a second, even if his hands did shake a bit. The tower was closed for its most recent refurbishment from 2017 to 2022.
They're strongly outlined, you'll see now, in a rather handsome royal blue colour, but during the war, I think for the first time, the Second World War, they were painted black. And it's only recently, in the most recent renovation, they've come back to their blue colour.
Now Big Ben is again set to take centre stage, as thousands of tourists are expected to flock into the British capital for New Year's celebrations.
So New Year is probably one of the biggest celebratory points in our calendar of the year. It's one of the biggest fireworks celebrations in the world. And all of this area here is where you can come and watch the fireworks. And obviously Big Ben plays a big part of that because all of the boings that go down until midnight.
According to London and Partners, over 15 million people from around the world visited London this year, exceeding pre-pandemic levels from 2019. Costa Menes, NTD News.
And for our last story of the year, police in Bartlett, Tennessee received an interesting call Christmas morning regarding a beaver on the loose inside a hospital.
Officers arrived to help and made sure the beaver made it home safe. Take a look.
Wow. If it's inside the...
It's inside the hospital in the lobby.
Oh my God, that's so weird. Let me see what I can do. I'll call the lieutenant. Maybe they can wrangle it and get it outside. I don't know, but I'll see if I can get you some help. But
okay, thank you.
Hey, it's Allison. St. Francis just called. There is a beaver loose in the ER lobby.
Can they not open the private, just open the door and just kind of shush him out the door?
I don't know. It was the operator that called and said that one of the nurses called and told him to call us.
Okay. I'll get somebody to go take a look.
No one was injured, including the beaver, after wheeling the animal out in a trash container.
Wow, yeah, so it would be one thing to come home and see beaver chew marks in your Christmas tree.
Yeah, the poor guy just wanted to maybe find some material to build his home. But in the ER, that point of view camera really got me. That was hilarious. All right. We're wrapping up our show now here this week and this year, but we'll keep you updated today with the latest information. Stay tuned for our News Today broadcast at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. We're wishing you all a happy new year. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Evelyn Lee.
Happy New Year. I'm Kevin Hogan.